Well, John, it's great to have you here. I'm Frank Underhill and my cousin Joe Underhill are here, and we just wanted to ask you a little bit about the history in Barbourville, because truly there's no other man living on the face of this earth that knows what you know about the history of Barbourville and the Underhills and the Turners. So we're delighted to have you here, and we just had a few questions that we had shown you ahead of time, and we don't necessarily 100% need to go by the script, but first question we want to ask you about is how the Underhills and the Turners wound up in Barbourville and such good friends.
Well, of course, they both came from Georgia, supposedly knew the families in Georgia, whether it was Volusia County or otherwise, but they knew of each other before they came here. Now, I don't...
Was Joseph Underhill, and your great-great-grandfather's name was?
Yes, my great-grandfather.
What was his name?
His name was William Turner.
Okay, William.
I have a little thing prepared here, if you don't mind.
Sure, absolutely.
If you're interested in the property and how it developed and why it developed in this particular area. Would you like to hear that?
Yes, sir.
First, the property was owned by a fellow by the name of Andrew J. Baker. His son, in 1828, wrote a little thing he called Recollections. That was 87 years ago, in September the 15th, 1928. His name was Henry A.J. Baker. I'd just like to read you the first paragraph of what he had to say about his father and why he came to Barbourville. On January the 1st, 1855, my father, Andrew J. Baker, immigrated from South Carolina to Florida on the steamer Elijah Baker, the steamer flying between Charleston and Jacksonville, and then the steamers Darlington to Enterprise on the north of Lake Monroe. A few days were excuse me. Few days were spent at Palatka. After a week of prospecting in the neighborhood of Enterprise, he dropped back to Volusia. Volusia being the largest settlement in the county at that time. After a week of prospecting in the neighborhood, he saw Captain Brock, being an old friend of my father, advised because he would find good farming sections, so my father did and settled in a place near or at Barbourville, where he lived for several years. Where my father sold this Barbourville property to William Turner, who sold it to Joseph Underhill, who lived and died on the place. Later, Mr. Turner was killed in a pitched battle at the Lake Como by William Braddock. That was the Turner-Braddock feud. Mr. Baker bought a home near De Leon Springs, known as Spring Garden, and there were a lot of Indians there at the time. And by the way, his mother, he said, died at Barbourville. So we know that in 1960, he was still, said he lived at Enterprise. And he was a well-known physician and minister. He received a patent there at Barberville, in Section 20, Township 15, Range 29, on 5/1/1855, under the Franklin Pierce administration. I have a copy of that patent here. That included all the land that is now in the Pioneer Oak settlement and where the house is. Now, why did he choose this place? He had a very good reason for choosing this place. This road which was well known, one of the oldest roads, went from Volusia to Spring Garden. Volusia was really started in around 1819, Spring Garden, 1924. Now, this road was very important. And as this road went from Volusia, it traveled north of Highway 40 till it got about a half a mile to what we call Stone Road today. Then it went south through the Martin Plantation. The Martin Plantation was well known, and during the Civil War, they had to move out over to Marion County. Then you came across and forded it at, later on this place became the town of Lundgren. It was platted. Then it went across to what we call the Martin Branch. They call these things fords. The reason that ford was there because it was on high land, and it was a sandy thing, and you could run a wagon through there at 3 feet deep. I used to catch fish there as a kid. Then it went up through.
A sidebar, I got Joe's father, Marion, I pulled him out of that spot back there many years ago. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Go ahead, interrupt me anytime, because I'm not too sharp on this anymore. Basically, it was topography to begin with, what he was looking for. If anybody knows what the property James Saul's on there in Barberville, and I asked my daddy, of all the places they could go, why did they want this particular place? Well, they were looking for a place basically on this road, that they could grow their corn any time of the year, that had a slope to it, and it didn't matter if it was a rainy year or not rainy. They were going to grow some corn. They needed that corn. So that's why what he was basically looking for had a lot to do with topography.
Could I ask you a question now?
Yeah.
I remember coming through Lundgren, through up on that hill. There used to be a spring there where the people from the Baptist church, they had a church there, a spring church or something. But when did the old road ever go in front of the Joseph Underhill house?
No.
There used to be a road there, but it was further west of that. Is that correct?
I can't tell you if that road went west or there, but I think it went to the north of it, and I think they had that thing set down there, and that they just had a reason for putting it facing the west.
Yeah, because I
don't believe there was any the house exactly where it was built had anything to do with a road going in front of it. Okay. But I don't know that for sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Anyway, now this guy was pretty smart, this Henry Baker. And remember, he came here in January 1855. What happened on December the 29th, 1854, just a month before this, Governor Broome created by law the county of Volusia. He also named at that time that Enterprise would be the county seat. Therefore, this road would be so popular running through this property that it extend on, which it did extend on to Enterprise. So he was a pretty smart guy, that all the traffic would be going that needed to go to the county seat would be going through this road, Volusia being the largest settlement of the county at that time.
So the road would have come through there was 119 acres originally in Baker
Yeah.
there.
Mm-hmm.
And the road went through that property at some point. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Went through the 119 acres?
Yes, it did.
So now I remember as a child, there was a road right in front of the house that went straight down.
Yes.
And curled down. It went over where the old highway is now. So that, I wonder if that was the original road.
It could have been. It followed the same thing, and I asked my father, and he said that it crossed Deep Creek at about the same place it's crossed today.
Yes, because that's an arrow.
Yes.
You know, so,
Yeah. Now, Baker did move to Barberville. At what time, I don't know. But in 1860, he owned 9 slaves. Of course, during the war, he moved over to Marion County. And sold the property to my grandfather, William Turner, in 8th day of August, 1862. Now, how did Baker knew William Turner? He knew him because in this thing is written by Baker's son. He says, I remember the night it was raining, and there was a shrill hello sounded at the gate. Someone of the family, perhaps my stepbrother, went to the door and asked, who is there and what can he want at this hour? They asked for Uncle Jack. Jack is what they called him. He says, is that you, Mary? She says, yes. Mary was a dancer down at Volusia, where they had their parties. She says, I'm after you to go to Volusia to see Dr. Turner. Little Dan Clifton shot him. Now, the reason that we know that he knew William Turner, it tells all about the fight, but anyway, he says, the distance from Delia Springs to Volusia is about 14 miles. After he made up his mind to go and do all he could to save the man, away they went. He stayed 4 days and nights, came home and went back off and on for 2 weeks. He probed and drew through him a silk handkerchief so as to keep the wound open. After 2 weeks, Dr. Turner's brother, that was my great-grandfather, decided to take him to St. Augustine for safety. My father told him not to do it, for the jolting on the rough roads would cause the wound to break open and he would bleed to death. But he took him anyway, and it killed him. So he knew, at that time, he knew my grandfather. The Bakers moved to Marion County during the war, later came back and formed the town of Bakersburg. Bakersburg had a big fine hotel, burned down, and for many years they had big political rallies at the Bakersburg Park there.
Now this is just north of Pearson.
North of Pearson. And I remember going to those political rallies very well because the guy running for office, and this was in the 1930s, asked me to deliver his cards and he gave me $1 bill. You don't know what that was in the early 1930s, so I remember that place really well. So the Bakers finally wound up, some of them living around north of Pearson there, and William Turner bought the place in 1862. We had a little war going on then, and my great-grandfather went to St. Augustine. I don't know how well he knew with the Underhills at that time, but they knew one another well. And I think he went with, or Underhill went with him. They went to St. Augustine and spent most of the war over there. During the time of the war.
That's a war of northern aggression.
Yeah. And what happened was, after William Turner came back, he went up near Seville and married Joseph Hickenbottom's widow, who owned the property right in the middle of the Braddocks, and they had a big feud. Of course, he was killed in that in 1869. But in 1968, not needing that property since he married this widow woman with the cows, and he sold the land to Joseph Underhill on February the 23rd, 1868.
68. So that was 119
It's
acres.
a whole 119 acres by legal description.
Right.
Joseph Underhill was born in Georgia in 1828, died in Barberville in 1886, married Lucretia Bird. One son, Thomas, of course, born in Blackshear, Georgia, married Sarah Clifton. Shows him in the Enterprise census. Joseph 28, Lucretia 25, Thomas 11. One of the earliest things on record after Volusia County came into being in 1854 was a claim of hogs purchased by Joseph Underhill. Of all the hogs by this person, I have the name here. What was his name? A claim of hogs all the way from Enterprise to Glencoe. Now, anybody that knows anything about Glencoe today, he has to know something about Volusia County history, because Glencoe was a very large place. And if you lived anywhere from Enterprise to Smyrna, you lived at Glencoe. Now nobody even knows where Glencoe is. But anyway, this was in Miscellaneous Book A, page 202, which means very early.
And John, when you say they purchase the hogs, I can remember as a child, people having hogs that were just in the woods, and they would be marked in a particular marking. So Joseph Underhill would buy the rights to all these range hogs that were just wild, and they would put a mark on them, and they would claim them as their own. Is that?
I can't remember. My great-grandfathers used to know it was clip, 2 underbits. But anyway, they knew what they were doing.
Right.
And they bought and sold these claims of hogs in certain areas. Now you got to remember, the hog was a very important animal in those days. It gave us that bacon that could be preserved, and gave us the lard and so forth and so on.
Still the world's greatest food.
Yeah, let's see what we got on Joseph here.
Well, you're finding your notes there in Thomas, in his, I was reading some of the history in the church history of the Baptist Church, and talking about his background after Joseph. But Thomas, that was the only son that Joseph and Lucretia had.
That's according to my records.
Right. That's the only son they had, and so he in the Barville area had a sawmill there. I understand.
Sawmill.
And I think they cut that lumber for the Baptist church there in late 1880s. And one of the things that I found in looking at this was he was elected to the state legislature in 1892, I believe, and I saw that he got 753 votes, I think. And I've got the document here, but I don't think he ever actually served in the legislature, because he died 3 months later in the accident. But
The prairie both those hogs was a guy by the name of Orrin J. Curry in 1860, and just exactly when he moved to Barberville, I don't know. We do know that his wife died at Barberville, so he had to be living there at the time too. According to the records of a book called maybe I don't have it. Anyway, it was a directory of the state of Florida. In 1883, Joseph owned 651 acres of land. Thomas owned 367 of land, and it came under the area of Volusia, not at Barberville. And it's very peculiar because Barberville wasn't known, Pearson wasn't known, but Emporia, was a lot of stuff in there about Emporia. As to the house, I'm sure you know a lot more about it. My question would be to you or anybody there, was the house completed in 1879? Here.
Well, I think they have it down as 1879.
Okay, that's the best I know about it.
Right.
Of course, after Joseph died, his wife married again.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1988, William Underhill, Will we call him, they tried to settle the estate as best they could. And it was quite a kind of a mess, I think. And she apparently died, according to this thing here, without owning any property. Petition of William B. Underhill to act as executor of will in the state of, well, they didn't have the name, Lucretia Underhill, a resident of Volusia County, Florida, who died October 1908, leaving a last will and testament that no one appointed as executor, that the deceased left personal property only. And she left surviving William H. Underhill, Zura Cruz, Melissa Cole, Lizzie Clark, Thomas Underhill. Petitioner W.R. Underhill is a resident of Barberville and requests that the will be admitted for probate. Now that was through with her, and then Thomas became in charge of everything from then on. One of the things, of course, happened was, this happened to everybody. Joseph had a lot of property, a lot of cows, a lot of orange groves. Of course, after he died there, the 1895 freeze did to him what it did to everybody else, and it was quite different. Now,
I noticed kind of a sidebar to that, John. I have some, and they had Pick Island, it was a little bit warmer there, and it had access to the steamboats that come for the fruit and that kind of thing. And in one of the notes there, it had reference to that freeze. And interesting, I've got a lot of the receipts here from Boston, Richmond, Virginia, and different places. And in all of the, when they'd sell the fruit, they sold it on commission. And it was, you would see the commission that they would do, and they would always have a comment about the fruit. The fruit was delicious. There were a few oranges in the bottom that were rotten or whatever they always had, and they would send back these commission reports when they would sell it on consignment, really is what they were doing in many cases. And but I saw some of those boxes of fruit in the 1800s selling for $4.50 a box. And, that's unimaginable money in those days, $4.50. And I've seen around here lately where before some of these things, you sell it for $5 a box. And here in the 1800s, they were selling it for 50 cents less than they were now. So, but anyway, excuse me, you go right ahead.
Well, what happened was, of course, a portion of the property there, whether all or not, we don't know, but a portion of it certainly went then to Samuel Edward Lemon. He was born in 1866, died 1838, moved to Barberville in 1884 as a farmhand. Didn't have a dime. But he was smart. He married Maria Eliza Mitchell, whose father was well known. William had property on that particular road about where Bill Wansford lived today. Had 2 children. Odetta, who married a Coleman who ran a store in Barberville for years, and Clyde. Clyde Lemon was well known. I don't know if this has any interest to you or not, but why people were known didn't have a lot to do with their history. It's just normal things. Clyde was so well known because, as far as I know, he was the only Republican listed as a voter in the Barberville precinct. Now, why would a person come to be a Republican in Barberville? It's very simple. The postmaster's job was a presidential appointment. And every time a Republican come in, Clyde got to be the postmaster. I don't know if you knew that. But these are just tales.
That's how it works.
That's how it worked back in those days. Okay.
I remember him very well because Mr. Lemon had the little store there on the northeast corner of the railroad track, and I would go there after school, and Mr. Lemon, they had an account set up, and you'd go in, and then I thought all that was for free because I'd give my friends, free ice cream, and they'd put it on a tab. And Mr. Lemon and his wife lived next door to my mom and dad, so it was, and I used to mow his yard when I was a young man.
Well, Mr. Lemon was perhaps best known because he printed his own money and had tokens called the S.E. Lemon token. I have one.
Do you really?
And I tried to find it, and it's in my junk, and I couldn't find it before I came here. However, I know where one is left, and it's one that I don't have. It's a $1 token. Somebody owns it right there near Barberville. I offered them $100 for it. They said, no way. So they are very valuable if anybody has an S.E. Lemon token, as I have.
Oh, wow.
Now, he was well known for that particular thing. Now, as far as the house is concerned, I was in that house many times as a young man because we were related to the Mitchews, and we called her Aunt Liza. After that, after Odetta died, I'm sure you know a lot more about what happened since then than I do. But I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have that I could answer on that sheet.
Well, as it relates, I think maybe to the house, you being there as a young man and kind of part of your family going there, what do you recall about the house as you would go there? And now it's a little bit dilapidated. Fortunately, we've been given a grant to kind of restore it, but as you as a person going there, what did you see as you saw that house?
Well, I saw first of all the brick house, which we didn't have. And I remember the stairs. Don't remember too much about the house itself. I remember it sitting. It was a well-known place. But as far as the house is concerned, I was probably in it maybe 3 times as a very young person. And I really wasn't that much impressed with it as a young person. I was just not old enough. But I knew it was a unique place. But
now, the kitchen, as I understand, and as I remember seeing it too as a child, I'm 73, so I can remember as a young person going there, but I recall that the well in the kitchen, and the kitchen was separated from the main part of the house with a little.
That was normal.
But was not the well to the house located in the kitchen area itself? I remember it as being actually in the kitchen itself, and the kitchen built around the well. Is that?
The reason the kitchens were separated usually by a thing in most of those old houses was, of course, the kind of fire.
Sure.
And usually the wells were near the kitchen. But I can't really tell you about that.
Right. Now, I don't know if that was really true. You know, sometimes you begin thinking about things, you
Yeah.
don't know if that's really the way it was or that's how I'm thinking it was. So
But it was
maybe you might like to, could we take a break just a minute? Maybe you want to get a little sip of water or something there, John? And
yeah, I'll take
take a
a
little break. And,
This is Joe Underhill. I'm the great-great-grandson of Joseph Underhill, and I'll be asking Mr. Turner a few questions. John, can you give us any information on the death? We know when Thomas Underhill died in 1893. Can you give us any idea where he may have been residing at the time in Barberville?
No, I don't know where he was residing. You got to remember now, his mother remarried, and this kind of shook up the family, I think. I don't know. And I don't know whether he went back to live there or not. But I believe at the one time he was not living there.
I heard talk that maybe he had lived at the home where my grandfather, William Underhill, where my dad was born. Had he lived there? Do you have any information on that?
No, I don't.
Can you tell us anything about the impact the railroad had in Barberville and what year it came through?
Yes, I can't tell you about a year, but I'll tell you what kind of impact it had. Most people don't know. They tried everything, from cotton to tobacco and everything. And most people don't know, but the late 1800s to the early 1900s, the money crop in Barberville and Lundgren, people would never know what it was. It was eggplant. My grandmother in Lundgren planted 1 acre of eggplant in the 1880s to be shipped down from Volusia to the north, to Philadelphia, to the Italians up there who had something to do with eggplants. I don't know what it was, but she took a chance and did this. She did this on what they call cow-pen land. Everybody had a bunch of cows in the woods, free range, but they also had a group of cows that they penned every night for milk and so forth. Where these cows were penned, that's where they grew the sweet potatoes and so forth. So Grandma decided to plant these eggplant and made $1,000. They didn't want to tell anybody about the eggplants, and they kept it a secret for years. That's why they bought the Emporia Hotel, London Hotel. They did it with eggplant. And I have a letter with Albert Turner's printed on his stationery, grower and shipper of fruits and vegetables from Barberville, Florida, in 1909, I believe it was. Well, they didn't tell anybody. So, but what happened, the impact, particularly on the eggplant business, when the railroad came through, they moved the eggplant business down further south and it couldn't grow. Now, most people don't even know anything about eggplants. I never did like them myself. My daddy always said he ate out of respect. He didn't like them either, but he ate some of them out of respect for the purple fruit. Made his family money, because $1,000 was a lot of money back in those days. And there's very little unknown thing about them growing, and they didn't want anybody to know about it. I can understand why. But they shipped them to New York and the Italians had something to do with eggplant. If anybody knows anything about it, I don't know. much about it, but they paid terrific prices to get them early in the year when they couldn't grow. So it certainly had an effect there. It also had an effect on the area that Eldridge, Mr. Eldridge thought the road was coming. One of the earliest railroads, as you know, was from Astor over to Cedar Keys. They thought that was going to come across and come through probably to Eldridge or someplace like that. And they formed a subdivision there called St. John's subdivision, I forget what it's called. That never happened after the railroad came through. And it had a lot to do with the shipping of the oranges. The eggplant business, of course, went to everything. But my understanding was that Barterville and Pearson, that the train stopped there longer than any other place on the whole road. So they had a lot of business there in Barterville, Eldridge, and Pearson, particular ferns and oranges.
Was there a hotel there in Barberville, near the railroad?
Hotel in Barberville? I don't know of any hotel in Barberville. They had the Lundgren Hotel, but no hotel there in Barberville. I know of.
Do you have any information on the black cemetery there in Barberville next to County Road 3?
I don't have much more than you have. We know that when they paved the road, went through there, called the Black Bear Trail, and they found all these and removed some bodies. Then in 1992, after the Pioneer Art Settlement got it, they found some bones. And I just spent the whole day with a lady studying those bones are digging up near the DeLand Hospital there. She also knew about these, and the bones that she looked at came from a young black girl. So it was a black cemetery. My father knew it was a black cemetery, and it's right in that little mound where that white sand is there. And all of them were moved apparently off the roadside, but apparently they didn't get them all over there. But it was a black cemetery. Now, Baker owned 9 slaves. Whether this was only a slave cemetery or whether it was a local cemetery for blacks, I do not know. We know it was there, and we know it was a black cemetery. And it was part of this land owned in that 119 acres.
Now, I'd also heard a story of a convict camp just south of there. Is that true also?
The convict camp in the 30s, the one I know, the big one, was across Highway 40 from where Dr. Smith's office was, where our land was. It was well known as a terrific camp. They even had a commissary on our land over there. I don't know why it was there, but I remember it well because I used to go over there all the time. And one day, one of the guards, I was fooling around, and I was looking at this box. So there, I knew they put these prisoners in there, and it was called a sweat box. He said, "You want to go in there?" I said, "Yeah, I went there." He slammed the door. And I stayed there about probably 10, 15 minutes. I began to holler, "Let me out of here." And he came by, let me out. He said, "Let me tell you something, son." He said, "Always obey the law, and you won't wind up in one of these boxes." I have no business saying this, but maybe we need some boxes today. I don't know. Not really, but I can tell you this. I always remembered that. I didn't want to spend any more time in the sweat box. Many people didn't know what a sweat box was. You ever heard of it? Okay. So I remember that place very well. And it was a big thing, but it was not in Barterville as I remember.
I guess they had armed guards and everything.
Oh, yeah. And why it was there, I can't really tell you, but it was a big thing.
Now, getting back to the Joseph Underhill house, of course, brick homes were very rare, of course. And my understanding is that clay came from Deep Creek. Do you have
Right,
information
that's
on
right,
clay,
correct.
clay pit and who discovered it, and any history on that?
The only thing I know is that the kiln was there. And I do have some information on it in some of my material that I couldn't find. All I know is that who did it, why they decided to do it there, I do not know, but I do have some information on it. I go through some of my material, but I don't know why they did it, and I don't know the location. Do you know, anybody know the location of the dig where they did it? I always thought if you go through before you get to Deep Creek, all my life there's been some holes on the left-hand side dug out there, if you notice. I always thought those were where they did it, but I don't know that for sure. So I don't know. I knew that the kiln was up at Deep Creek where they made the bricks, held them there and built the house. And as far as I know, it was completed by 79.
Do you know if Joseph Underhill is actually the one who did the construction, or was there someone else?
I have no reason, know why he decided to build it. None whatsoever, except it's a beautiful home. I have no reason why he built it.
Do you know what the property where the present day Pioneer Ark settlement is, what it was used for in the 1800s? Was it a farm?
It was part of that farm, yeah.
Farm.
Mm-hmm. You got to remember now, some of that those Linden orange groves didn't come back after 95. So we don't know really what was there. And I don't think there's anybody that can really tell you.
Do you have any other information like on the town of Barberville, its surroundings during that period of time, 1879 to the early 1900s? What was going on there besides, the fruit industry and?
Well, of course, it was originally called Midway. That was due to the Methodist preachers that went from place to place, and this was midway between something and something. I think it's in the book that my wife did. She spent a lot of time doing that thing in Barberville, and I got it in the car, but I didn't bring it in. That does tell you more about Barberville and how it was founded and about the barbers. But for some reason, Barberville didn't catch on like Emporia did. First of all, Emporia, the reason it was so popular, had the first telephone system in Volusia County. Had more flush toilets than any place in Volusia County. This was due to the Yankees that came down there and built these tremendous homes. They had a windmill with a tank up top, so they could have flush toilets and so forth and so on. So Emporia got all the credit for all the things going on with their telephone system and so forth and so on. But you didn't have these so-called Yankees there in Barberville. They were local people. Now, what happened was, this didn't wind up good for the Yankees because the crackers didn't know how to borrow money. The Yankees did. And after the freeze, a lot of the crackers bought the Yankee houses there in Emporia. The crackers didn't want to borrow any money, but the Yankees knew all how to do that kind of stuff. They were simply, a lot of them were better educated, you know. But that Barberville High School, as I remember it, I can see pictures of children, especially seniors, wearing ties to school. And anybody that graduated from Central High School at that time had an education. There's no question about it. And when you graduated from the Emporia School in the 8th grade, you had an education. And so that's basically all I can tell you about it. The bishops were big people in Eldridge. He was big in the turpentine industries. And of course, Barberville had this turpentine industries there. And I can remember that That was the biggest thing that I knew of in Barberville, was the Turpentine Still. And of course it was located right on the north side of Highway 40. I remember that still very well. I believe Mr. McKay had a lot to do with that. Like I say, Barberville that type of thing didn't catch on, but the school was very unique because it took all the people from the so-called Clifton Beltwell settlement went there, plus this place called Conrad, which nobody knows anything about, but you know where Conrad is, where at Deep Creek. All those children went to the Barberville. They went to Central High School. And that was one of the things that was interesting was this school thing was not deeded by Samuel Lemon. Since he was a member of the school board, he didn't want to give it to them, praying for this big Central High School. He did a political thing. I had been told for years that there was a reverter clause in that deed that said if it never be used for a school anymore, that land would revert back to the Lemons. This was not true. He deeded this to Jake Mencher, his brother-in-law, who then deeded to the school for political reasons. A lot of people don't know that. But there was no reverter clause in that deed. And I don't know why I heard this up till the Barberville School bought the property. So I checked it out at the time.
My understanding was before the school was built, there was a small school over there on the east side of 17
Yes.
near the Barber property.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, there was, and that, I wish I'd have bought that magazine, but my wife wrote about that, and all you have to do is get into Volusia, the west side, and look in the Barberville area, and you'll find that.
The remains of that house are still there. I saw it, several years ago. I went over there. I could see where the old school was, yeah. Was it actually in the Barber house, or was it
I don't know. I'd have to read all the material to remember.
Okay.
Now you got to remember, that many of these schoolhouses were also churches at that time. The one in Lundgren was not only a school, but it was a church. That was done by my grandfather, the Lundgren School was, and there were people that went to there, like Ed Stone, who became sheriff of the county, George Stone became land chief of police, Oscar Hall, who was raised by Joseph Underhill, his father, as so-called orphans. Are you familiar with that? His name was, I can't remember his name, was Oscar Hall's father plus another fellow.
One named Hutton?
Yeah.
And
I have that right here. I can find it.
was there a cruise also?
Huh?
A cruise?
If you have time, I'll look it up.
Now, these would be the orphan kids that Joseph Underhill took in, correct? Yeah. Where's the cruise? There was a Hutton buried at Purdom Cemetery, and my understanding is he was one of the orphan kids.
According to the 1880 census, this couple adopted 2 children. Question is, were they adopted legally? Isom Hall, who married Dericus Cowless, October 1882. and then Virginia Thigpen. Thigpen was a well-known person in Barberville. He was a surveyor, and I worked with him as a kid, cutting and chopping lines for him. And still they're using what they call Thigpen corners, if anybody knows anything about surveying. There's some hole. Virginia B. Thigpen married William E. Hedgecock. 19th of February, 1887. Volusia County Marriages, Book P, page 303. That's the Hedgecock you're talking about?
Out in Hutton was the one I was,
I don't know anything about Hutton.
Hutton buried at Persian Cemetery. And my understanding is he was one of the orphans that was raised by Joseph Underhill.
I don't know. I don't know what happened to, all I know is Thigpen was a prominent name in Barberville for years. Surveyor.
Now, Lucretia Underhill, she married, I don't know if she married or got hooked up with a guy named Lichtenstein.
Yes.
Can you tell us, give us the history of that and what happened with the house after that happened?
Well, there is a whole thing written. In February 1895, the Volusia County Record wrote this story about her marrying. If you're not all familiar with it, it says 15 or 20 years ago, Joseph Underhill, once a county commissioner of Volusia County, was reputed to be one of the wealthiest citizens of this county. In all events, he was known to have his cattle by the thousands, lived in a handsome brick mansion. The only one in that section had a large land district and 2 orange groves, supposedly had all the plenty of money lying around. Now, this is a thing talking about his wife. Lucretia married a fellow by the name of Joseph Lichtenstein. And there was quite a thing about it. They had quite a bit of time. He kind of took her for her money, basically. There's a whole 5 pages of this thing, if anybody wants to read it. But apparently he took her for some money, moved off and went off, and he, last thing here says, he attempted suicide at Monticello. He eloped with a Mrs. John Camp from Barberville and all this kind of stuff. Mrs. Lichtenstein was left with a old mule and 2 dead groves. Anyway, it wasn't a very good thing. I don't even bring this up usually, but apparently her second marriage didn't work well.
So did he didn't get the house, so she still was in possession of the house, right, when he left?
Yes,
okay.
She had the house, but after 1908, she didn't have the house anymore after Thomas died and Will Underhill took it over. I don't know. I do not have the deed where Samuel got this property. I don't know what year he got it. All I know is he did himself well by coming in and marrying into a good family. Made a lot of money out in Barberville.
But Liechtenstein basically got Lucretia's money and left town.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, on the house, there was an outside staircase. Do you remember the outside staircase in the house?
No, I don't. I wish I did remember, but I was young when I used to go there, and I just didn't think about history back in those days or anything. So I don't remember about it. And in the later years, I know y'all know more about that house than I do, but I can only tell you about the early years. I will try to look up and find the information on the kiln and who did the brick work down there. And I don't know who did the masonry work. I have no idea. But I do have something on it.
Now, the brick wall is a double layer, 2 bricks. Can you give us any information on why that was built that way?
No, I don't know, but you got to remember now, they didn't have a lot of concrete and stuff to mess with back in those days. And I think it was just made to make it sturdy, but I don't know.
Were there still Indians around the area when the house was built in 1879?
No, the Indians were already gone by that time.
Right.
79.
Is there anything else you want to say about Barberville or the surrounding area?
No, nothing I can think of right now. I do want to mention one thing. That has nothing to do with. It does have a little bit to do when Dr. Baker went down to see this Dr. Turner that was shot. This Dr. Turner was somebody that we didn't know a whole lot about. I knew he was my grandfather's brother. It's just interesting that he did not show up for the distribution of his father's estate. And one of the early records of Volusia County showed him as an attorney. I had heard that he was a doctor, but I didn't know anything about it. But if Dr. Baker said he was a doctor, he must have been a doctor. This has nothing to do with the history, except one side of the family always said about this guy. They were divided as to who he was and what he was, a phony or not. But one side of the family said the reason he didn't show up for the reading of this will and all, because he's probably in jail. The other said, oh no, he was going to medical school. But that was some of the just stories that they told about. It was interesting that Baker would have known well about Dr. Turner that was killed.
John, I have a question for you. In the accident to Thomas Underhill in 1892, there was a doctor there were 4 in the boat, the 2 women and Thomas, and I understood that the other smaller statured man was a doctor. Did you know his name and who was in the boat the day he was shot?
No, but I've got some information right here. You just give me a little bit of time. If I can find it.
I know they left the women on shore so they could row faster to get him back to Barberville.
I believe, in recollections, this guy wrote something about this thing. Can you give me just a minute?
While you're looking for the papers, there was a question whether or not that we'd put him on the train to bring him to DeLand And then the doctor viewed his condition and said, no, what we need to do is order a casket. And I have a copy of the casket order, and it was $75. But they said that he was not going to survive, so they ordered the casket and instead of putting him on the plane. I incidentally have that shotgun that he was killed with. It was a 12 gauge old rabbit ear shotgun. So when it fell off the seat, the hammer hit the side of the boat and discharged. That's how he was killed.
I can't find that right now, but I do have some information. Who was with him, and if I remember right, it was an accident. He was getting out of a boat,
Right.
and he got shot.
Yeah.
But I do have that information somewhere here.
John, I believe Deborah West of the Pioneer Settlement has a question about the house.
Actually, it's a question about if you have ever heard of a church originally being located on the settlement property, roughly where the school stands now. There was the young lady that you talked to. That's with the DeLand Hospital bones, that was questioning about that, has been doing some research, and she found a 1907 tax roll that shows that the property that was owned by Lucretia Underhill, that there was a church located there.
This girl has done a lot of research. I spent a whole day with her, and I don't know why what her real interest is in this thing, but I don't know of any church previous to this school. What year was the school built? I forget.
It was 1919.
1919?
So this was 1907, and she says, and then after 1907, there's no further record of it. And since schools and churches were used,
They were used, yes.
simultaneously at that point, I thought maybe somebody had a recollection of maybe a building there that could have served as that.
Anything else?
One more question. The old Midway Methodist Midway Church there in Barberville is now on the grounds of the Pioneer Ark Settlement. Do you have any information or history on that at all?
The
Methodist Church.
Methodist Church?
It was over on Church Street. Now it's on the grounds of the Pioneer Ark Settlement.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Most information I would have on this, what my wife wrote in the book, and I didn't bring it in there.
Okay.
It was built somewhere close to the 90s, about the same time that the First Baptist Church was built in 1890. They had met many times previous to that, but originally that church was there at Lundgren, where there was a spring, and there were 3 or 4 different churches in the area, the Baptist side. But I'd read the history of that church, and it said that it was actually built I think in 1890, that building, and Thomas Underhill had the sawmill, and he gave the lumber for the church to be built. And it was $1,000 what they raised to build that church. I think it was erected in 1890.
There was a spring in a school, we call it the Mud Pond, over there in the Peterson Cemetery over there, and a creek going out of it. As a child, I saw that spring flowing out there, and there was my grandmother went to school there in the 1870s. The church was it was used as a church and a school. 1 acre of land. That's where Troy Peterson lived.
Right.
And the Barberville Church had something to do with that also.
Right. That group came from
Yes, they came from there.
Church.
Yes, they called it Spring Church. And that's in the book written by my wife there. I should have brought it in here, but I didn't. because that church, that 1 acre of land, I just filed for a tax deed on it and didn't get it. I just wanted to keep it to preserve it. It was one of the older schools in Volusia County. That on the Lake Erie School. Now where I live on, we call Lake Erie, there was a school there too. One at Lundgren, one at, and the teacher at the Lundgren school was some of the Turners from over in Lake County, and she showed me her teacher certificate was signed by Bert Fish. He was at one time, with all the things that he did, he was the, I guess, big school board man. A lot of people didn't know that. They would not let her teach school in Lake County because she was only 16. She taught at the London school, and she showed me years later her teacher certificate where my daddy went to school. And there were a lot of people went to school there. Some of the halls, like I say, Ed Stone, George Stone, some of the Turners, and Lucases. The Lucases were an old family by there. I don't know if you knew that or not. They lived on Lake Erie.
Right. Well, John, listen, we thank you for taking the time. I wish we had gotten you 25 years ago to let you talk for 150 hours, you know, but we hope maybe we can do this again, and just because you're the last of the Mohicans here. And
I have a lot of other material that's in storage.
Well, when we close this down, I'm going to ask you a question. What are you going to do with all that material? Have you knighted someone that's going to go through this stuff, this reams of stuff, because it should be preserved?
Well,
We just have a shrine at your house. So.
Is there anybody here from the society? Yes. Well, here's the problem we have. This is a letter of transmittal to Mr. William Draggers, December 26th, year 2000. I turned over a whole lot of equipment to him, plus a whole book. And I said here, I have enclosed under cover several deeds, grants, maps, correspondence, notes, articles relative to the naming of Volusia. Attempt has been made to provide information on the following. When was the settlement of Volusia named? Who named the settlement of Volusia? Why was the settlement named Volusia? If you go down right now and look for this information, you cannot find it. I can't even find it. It's there, but it's not cataloged. I have a problem giving this stuff away. I let it die, and I guess the kids will throw it in the trash, but we need more people working, cataloging this stuff, because not only recently did they say the actual, where was Volusia named? You got it there. As far as I'm concerned, nobody's ever denied that's not the truth. Yet, nobody there seems to know where it is and what it is. So there's a danger of putting this stuff in the basement. Stetson University, by the way, when I did a lot of research on the book that I did, I found out that there's a lot of it is hidden. Well, I don't say hidden, but it's not out for the public to see. So you wonder what to do with it. I don't know. I've been thinking about that myself, because I've got a tremendous amount of it, especially a lot about the work that Horatio Dexter did, and what happened to in writing this Volusia County history, I found out that there's a lot of this stuff that's really not taken care of in these places that it should be. And it's difficult for people to get in their catalog list, I know that. But if you have it there and nobody can go in there and find it, it's not good either way.
That's right. Might not exist.
So I don't know what to do with all of it.
Well, in the days to come, I hope it'll be made clear what you are to do with it, but it
Yeah.
certainly needs to be preserved, and hopefully somebody will get a passion to do it.
Not only that, my wife has all the tapes done on that book, Volusia, the West Side. Some of them are not any good anymore. And they're very interesting because she was the Georgia cracker, not from Florida here. And they would tell her every now and then, shut that recorder off, I want to tell you something. She was very careful about writing in this book nothing bad about anybody. Good, mostly all good. And she has all her material.
As a representative of the West Volusia Historical Society, all I can say is we appreciate what you've already donated, and we'd like to talk with you further about donating your other records and materials, and we are in the process.
If they will catalog and give them for public use,
We are going to be digitizing all of the material we have, so it will be more available to the public.
And I verify she is very organized. I can tell you that.
Well, I'm glad this is happening because, you know, I was, what do they call these people? I was a director. I was one of the early directors, as you probably know, of that.
Well, thank you very much for being here today. We really appreciate it.
I'm sorry my mind is not any better than it was.
Great.